betrayal, deception, revenge. What you're about to hear is not fiction. I'm Booze N, and every video on this channel is a confession, a scar, a buried truth. Subscribe if you're brave enough to hear the whole story. I hadn't driven through Willow Street in almost 5 years. The road looked the same, but everything else felt different. Smaller, somehow quieter, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. The elm trees that once shaded my father's front yard now stood bare, their branches twisting like old fingers in the cold November wind. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind of gray morning that presses against your chest and makes every mile feel heavier than the one before. I parked across the street from the house I used to call home, a 2-story colonial with white siding, blue shutters, and a porch that used to smell like my dad's coffee every morning. For a long time, I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house. The curtains in the living room were drawn, but I could still picture the light filtering through them, bouncing off the polished wood floors and landing on my father's chair. He'd always sit by the window to read the paper. The Star Ledger folded perfectly in half, his glasses perched low on his nose. I was 30 now. 30 years old and feeling like a stranger in my own story. The truth is, I hadn't left New Jersey because I wanted to. I left because the house stopped feeling like home the moment Dad remarried. Her name was Evelyn, my stepmother. She was in her early 40s, then sharp elegant, with the kind of beauty that looked expensive. She met my father at a charity gala just a year after my mother died. I didn't hate her. Not at first. But grief has a way of turning everything unfamiliar into a threat. When she moved in, she brought new furniture, new rules, and a new version of my father. Softer, quieter, more cautious. I told myself he was happy that maybe he deserved someone like her after all the years he'd spent alone. But Evelyn didn't just move into his house. She moved into his mind. And eventually she moved me out of both. When I finally stepped out of the car, the November air bit into my skin. I carried a small duffel bag, mostly clothes and some files from work, but the weight I felt wasn't from the bag. It was from everything I'd tried to leave behind. I rang the doorbell. For a few seconds, I heard nothing, just the wind and the faint hum of traffic from Route 29. Then the door opened. Evelyn stood there, arms crossed, lips painted the color of old wine. "Well," she said, voice flat, "look who finally remembered where he came from." I didn't answer right away. My eyes went past her toward the hallway behind, toward the faint sound of a heart monitor. "How's Dad?" I asked. Her expression didn't soften. "Worse. The doctors say it's only a matter of time." My chest tightened. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. We'd talked on the phone, sure, but he'd always kept the calls short. He didn't like to talk when Evelyn was around. I tried to step inside, but she blocked the doorway with her arm. "This house isn't your playground anymore, Henry," she said. "You can't just disappear for months and then show up when there's a will to be written." Her words hit harder than she could have known. "Excuse me." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't act surprised. The lawyer came by last week. I know what you're after." I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I came here because my father's dying, not because of his money." She smiled, that slow, dismissive smile that used to make me grind my teeth when I was younger. "Sure, Henry, that's what they all say." She turned and walked deeper into the house, leaving the door open. "He's in the study. Don't tire him out. He doesn't have the strength for your drama." I stood there a moment, fists clenched, before stepping inside. The smell hit me first, antiseptic, mixed with the faint scent of my father's cologne. The house was colder now, both literally and in spirit. The family portraits had been replaced with expensive abstract art. The carpet runner down the hallway was new, probably imported. The warmth that used to live here, the laughter, the Sunday dinners, the sound of my father's voice, all of it had been scrubbed clean. When I reached the study, the door was half open. My father sat by the window just as I remembered, though he looked smaller now, thinner, fragile, a shadow of the man who once built this home with his bare hands. "Dad!" He turned slowly, and when he saw me, his eyes softened. "Henry, son, is that you?" His voice cracked, but there was a faint smile. I went to him, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders during fireworks at Liberty State Park. "It's me, Dad," I said quietly, taking his hand. "I came as soon as I heard." He squeezed my hand weakly. "You didn't have to drive all the way from Trenton." "I wanted to." He nodded as if that meant something deeper than it sounded. For a while, we just sat there, silence filling the room. Then he said something that made my throat tighten. "Your mother would have been proud of you, Henry." I swallowed hard. "You really think so?" He smiled faintly. "She always said you had my stubbornness. That's a curse and a gift." Outside the door, I heard soft footsteps, Evelyn's no doubt hovering. I lowered my voice. Dad, I need to ask you something. About the will. He frowned slightly. What about it? Evelyn said. He raised his hand weakly. Don't let her get in your head. I made sure you're taken care of. There was something in his tone, a quiet finality that scared me. Dad? What do you mean you made sure? He looked toward the window. There's a safe deposit box. At the bank on Elm Street. If anything happens, the door opened suddenly. Evelyn's voice cut through like a blade. That's enough for today. I turned. I'm talking to my father. She stepped closer. Her perfume too strong, her tone too calm. And I'm telling you, he needs rest. If you actually cared about his health, you'd stop stressing him with your greed. Greed, I snapped. You think this is about money? She smiled thinly. Everything's about money, Henry. You just haven't figured that out yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in the guest room, my old room, though it hardly felt like mine anymore. The posters were gone, the desk replaced by a minimalist dresser. Outside, the rain started soft at first, then steady. At midnight, I heard voices down the hall. Evelyn and her son Caleb, a man in his 20s, arrogant and loud, were talking in hushed tones. He's not staying, Evelyn said. Once the will's finalized, he's gone. Caleb laughed quietly. You think he'll give up that easy? He will, she said coldly. He always does. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart thudding. Once your father signs the revised version, everything's locked in, she added. Henry gets nothing but sentimental junk. You'll inherit the house. The company shares go to me. Company shares. It hit me then, they weren't just planning to cut me out of the will. They were trying to take over Ellis Haulage, the transport company my father built from nothing. The business he once told me would be mine someday. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest, the kind that doesn't burn, just freezes everything solid. If they thought I'd walked away once they were right. But this time I wasn't leaving empty-handed. This time I was staying and watching. And when the moment came, they'd learn what it felt like to lose something that was never theirs to begin with. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of Evelyn's voice echoing down the hall. For a second, I forgot where I was, then the ache in my chest reminded me. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and stared into the mirror above the sink. The man staring back didn't look like someone who belonged in that house. The beard was too scruffy, the eyes too tired, the jawline too tight with resentment. Somewhere between the years of working in warehouses, paying off debts, and pretending I didn't care, I'd stopped recognizing myself. When I came down to the kitchen, Evelyn was sitting at the counter scrolling through her phone. Caleb leaned against the fridge, dressed like he was headed to a country club instead of work. They both looked up when I walked in. Morning, I said, forcing civility. Evelyn didn't look up. The coffee's for your father. I didn't ask for any. You didn't have to, she replied, her eyes still on the screen. You have that look again. I raised an eyebrow. What look? The one that says you think the world owes you something, Caleb snorted. He's just mad he didn't come back sooner. Guess guilt's hard to swallow without cream and sugar. I ignored him and went to pour myself a cup anyway. The kitchen had changed, new marble countertops, imported appliances, everything gleaming. The only thing that hadn't changed was the clock above the pantry still ticking too loud. Where's Dad? I asked. In his room, Evelyn said, finally setting her phone down. The nurse will be here soon. Try not to upset him again. He barely slept last night. Her words made me pause. Barely slept. Did he say why? She shrugged. He's dying, Henry. Everything upsets him, even you. That one landed deep, but I didn't let her see it. I'll check on him anyway, I said quietly. Dad was awake when I came in, reading something on his lap, old company documents, judging by the logo in the corner. He smiled faintly when he saw me. Morning, son. I pulled a chair up beside his bed. You should be resting, not working. He waved a thin hand. Resting's for the dead. I'm not there yet. I couldn't help but smile. That was him, stubborn as ever. What are you looking at? I asked. He turned the paper toward me. Quarterly shares for Ellis Haulage. You remember the company, don't you? Of course I do, I said. You built it from scratch. He nodded slowly. Back when trucks were still mechanical beasts? No GPS, no tracking, just grit and long nights. His voice softened. I wanted to leave something that mattered. I looked down at the papers. Dad? Did you change your will recently? He hesitated, then nodded. Evelyn said it was for simplicity. Less confusion after I'm gone. My gut twisted, and you trust that. She means well, he said, though even he didn't sound convinced. Dad, she's planning to rewrite your life before it's even over. His eyes flickered with something guilt, maybe, or fear. Henry, he whispered. Not everything's a battle. I wanted to tell him it was a battle that he just didn't see the war Evelyn was waging behind his back. But I couldn't. His face looked too tired for more truths. So I just sat there watching his chest rise and fall and wondering how long I'd been gone for things to rot this much. That afternoon, while Evelyn was out and the nurse was in the kitchen, I went back to the study. I needed to see what my father had been working on. The desk drawers were neatly arranged, almost too neatly, but the bottom one stuck slightly. When I pulled it open, I found a folder marked Ellis Hollage, Legacy Accounts. Inside were photocopies of company shares, old invoices, and handwritten notes. One line written in my father's shaky handwriting stood out. Henry, 40% holding to be transferred upon full ownership clause. 40%. My name, my father's initials beside it. He'd meant for me to inherit part of the company. But if Evelyn had rewritten the will, that clause could vanish overnight. As I was about to close the drawer, I heard footsteps. I shoved the folder back and turned, but it wasn't Evelyn. It was Caleb. He leaned against the doorway, smirking. You always were bad at sneaking around. I crossed my arms. I wasn't sneaking. Sure, he said. That's why you're digging through my stepdad's desk. He's my father. Not for long, apparently. Something inside me snapped. I took a step forward. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged. You'll see. Let's just say things are about to get a lot more official. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Oh, and Henry? You might want to check your tone when you talk to Evelyn. She's not just the wife, she's the executor. The executor. The word hit like a hammer. She wasn't just controlling the will, she was controlling how it would be enforced. That evening I called an old friend, Jacob Lynn, a corporate attorney who'd once worked with Ellis Hollage on logistics contracts. He was the only person I trusted with anything remotely close to this. Henry, he said after I explained everything. If she's executor and your dad signed a revised will under her influence, that's potential coercion. But proving it won't be easy. What do I need? Copies of the old will. Anything that shows intent letters, drafts, financial records with your name. I thought of the folder in the drawer. I might have that. Good, Jacob said. But don't let her catch you taking anything. She'll spin it as theft. Believe me, I said she already thinks I'm the villain. He sighed. Then play the part. But play it smarter than she does. The days that followed blurred together hospital visits, quiet dinners, and the unspoken tension that thickened every time I walked into a room. Evelyn treated me like an intruder. Caleb treated me like competition. And my father? He just kept fading. One night I stood by his bed as he drifted to sleep. His breathing was shallow, the heart monitor slow and steady. I noticed a keychain on his nightstand, old rusted with a tiny tag that read number 233, Liberty Bank, the safe deposit box. He hadn't been imagining it. I slipped the keychain into my pocket. For the first time in days, I felt purpose humming under my skin again. The next morning, I left early, told Evelyn I was going to get coffee. Instead, I drove straight to Liberty Bank on Elm Street. The clerk looked at the key and nodded. Box 213, registered under Mr. Ellis and one secondary name, Henry Ellis. Hearing that almost undid me. She led me into a small private room. The box was heavier than I expected. Inside were several envelopes, a sealed flash drive, and a handwritten note. The note said, "If you're reading this, son, I'm probably gone. I didn't leave you the house because I knew she'd fight for it. But I left you the truth and the power to rebuild what's yours. Trust no one who calls you greedy for loving what I built." Dad. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. The flash drive, when I plugged it into the bank's computer, contained scanned documents, old contracts, stock certificates, and something else, emails, between Evelyn and a law firm. They were discussing transfer of ownership, company liquidation, and posthumous proxy authorization. She wasn't just trying to steal the inheritance. She was planning to dismantle the entire company and cash out. When I got back home, she was waiting for me in the living room. "Where were you?" she asked. I met her gaze evenly. "Out," she smiled thinly. "You're a terrible liar." "So are you." Her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Henry." "No," I said, voice calm but firm. "You watch yours. Because from now on, I'm not the one hiding." Her expression shifted just for a moment from confidence to uncertainty. "You think you can fight me?" she said softly. "I don't need to fight you," I replied. "I just need the truth to speak." And for the first time since I'd returned to Willow Street, I saw something flicker behind her perfect smile, fear. That night I sat by my father's bedside and whispered, "I found it, Dad. I found what you wanted me to." His hand twitched weakly, and for a second I thought he might wake. But he didn't. I looked at him. This man who'd built everything and trusted the wrong people, and made myself a promise. They took my home once. They won't take my father's name. Not again. The will before the funeral. Henry faces loss, betrayal, and the first cracks in the family empire. The house felt like a waiting room for death. For days, my father's breathing grew shallower, the machines slower, the nurses quieter. You can feel it when life starts to fade from a home, the air gets heavy, like it's trying to hold on to something it knows it can't keep. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about that flash drive that documents the note. His words looped in my head. Trust no one who calls you greedy for loving what I built. On the fifth night, he was gone. No thunder, no cinematic last words. Just silence, the kind that doesn't echo, doesn't move. One minute he was breathing, the next he wasn't. The nurse called it peaceful. Evelyn called it merciful. I called it too damn soon. When they wheeled his body out, I followed it to the door. Evelyn touched my arm, a gesture that might have looked caring to anyone else. I'll handle the arrangements, she said softly. You've done enough. I looked at her hand, then back at her. You mean I've seen enough? Her lips twitched. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Then she turned away, already pulling out her phone. Even in death, she made sure to control the room. The funeral was 3 days later held at St. Michael's Church in Trenton. A gray November morning, same as the day I'd arrived. It felt like the sky was grieving with us, or maybe mocking us. The church was packed. My father had been well-loved employees, old business partners, neighbors. Everyone came to say goodbye. But as I stood there watching Evelyn in her black designer dress and pearl veil, I realized how many of them were here more for appearances than affection. Caleb stood beside her, straight-backed, holding her elbow like some kind of trophy son. His eyes met mine across the aisle, a smug little spark in them that made my stomach turn. During the service, I tried to focus on the priest's words, but they blurred into static. Every phrase, a man of honor, a generous spirit, a loving husband and father, felt like a script written by someone who'd never met him. When it ended, I stayed behind while everyone else went to the reception. The church slowly emptied until it was just me, the coffin, and the smell of lilies. I placed my hand on the wood. You deserved better than this circus, Dad. My voice cracked. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. The silence didn't answer, but somewhere deep down, I felt like he'd already forgiven me. 2 days later came the moment Evelyn had been waiting for, the reading of the will. It was held in my father's lawyer's office in Newark, a sterile conference room with glass walls and no warmth whatsoever. I arrived early. Evelyn and Caleb came fashionably late, of course, dressed like they were attending a press conference rather than a will reading. The lawyer, Mr. Dawson, was an older man. Gray suit, thinner than I remembered his face, marked by years of quiet observation. He looked at me with something almost like pity. Mr. Ellis, he said softly. I was sorry to hear about your father. He spoke of you often. Thank you, I said. Let's get this over with. When Evelyn entered, she gave Dawson a polite smile and took the seat at the head of the table like she already knew the outcome. Shall we begin? She said smoothly. Dawson nodded and opened a folder. His voice was calm, professional. Per the last will and testament of Mr. Arthur Ellis, dated October 8th, 2024. My pulse quickened. I could feel Evelyn's eyes flick toward me, just waiting. The estate shall be divided as follows. He cleared his throat. To my wife, Evelyn Ellis, I leave the family residence at 42 Willow Street and all personal property therein. To her care, I also leave the maintenance of my medical estate and insurance claims. Evelyn smiled faintly. Predictable. Dawson continued. To my stepson, Caleb Morgan. I leave the boat and its associated accounts held under Ellis Marine Holdings. Caleb nodded, smug. Then Dawson looked at me. To my son, Henry Ellis. I felt my breath catch. I leave the sum of $1. The words hit like a car crash. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then I saw Evelyn's smirk, Caleb's grin, and the sudden silence in the room that followed. $1, I repeated, my voice barely steady. Dawson's eyes met mine, apologetic, almost helpless. Yes, Mr. Ellis. It states here that you have been otherwise provided for during your father's lifetime. I laughed once, short, sharp, bitter. Otherwise provided for? I haven't taken a dime from him in years. Evelyn tilted her head. Maybe he meant emotionally. Shut up, I said louder than I meant to. Dawson held up a hand. Please, Henry. No, I snapped, standing up. This is a lie. My father would never. But then I stopped, because on the final page of the document there was his signature. My father's handwriting, unmistakable. The curve of the A, the tail of the E. It was him, and yet it wasn't. Something about it felt off, too clean, too uniform, like it had been traced or copied. Evelyn stood smoothing her dress. If you're finished embarrassing yourself, some of us have lives to manage. She turned to leave. Caleb followed, throwing me a smirk on the way out. Dawson waited until they were gone before speaking. Henry, there's something you should know. I turned slowly. What? He lowered his voice. Your father brought me a draft of a will 3 months ago, not this one. It left you 40% of the company shares. But I never received the signed copy. Then what the hell is this? I can't say for certain, he said quietly, but I can tell you it wasn't signed here. That night, I drove back to the house, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see where the lie began. Evelyn was in the living room sipping wine. Rough day, she asked. I ignored her. You forged it. She smiled, almost proud. That's a dangerous word, Henry. Careful where you throw it. You think you can rewrite his life with a few signatures and lawyers? She set her glass down gently. I didn't rewrite anything. Your father made his choice. Maybe you should have been here more often to remind him you existed. I stepped closer. You're a liar! She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. And you're broke. Let's see who the world believes. Something in me broke then. The kind of break that doesn't heal, it hardens. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at her and said, You've taken everything, Evelyn. So now I have nothing to lose. She froze. The confidence flickered for half a second. Then I walked upstairs, packed my things, and left that house for the second time in my life. But this time I wasn't running. This time I was planning. Over the next week, I dug into every file, every email, every record from the flash drive. Jacob helped quietly from his office in Newark, connecting dots Evelyn never expected anyone to see. And slowly, a picture began to form, one that was uglier than even I imagined. Evelyn hadn't just influenced my father. She'd manipulated his medication schedule, convinced his doctors to limit certain prescriptions, and isolated him from longtime employees. She'd even transferred company contracts into her own holding firm, all under the guise of restructuring for tax efficiency. She didn't just want the money, she wanted to erase me. But she made one mistake. The safe deposit box wasn't the only thing my father left me. He also left a digital ledger one I hadn't opened yet. Encrypted password protected, labeled HE. I plugged in the drive, entered the password I thought he'd use my mother's birthday, and it opened. Inside was a list of transactions, emails, and voice memos. The last file was dated just a week before he died. When I hit play, his voice filled the room. Henry, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. Evelyn thinks she's smarter than everyone, but she forgets one thing I taught her everything she knows. You'll find the proof of her fraud in the ledger. Use it wisely, son. Don't destroy her. Outsmart her. His voice broke near the end. Win back what's ours. The right way. I sat there for a long time after that, the sound of his voice echoing in the dark. He was right. I wasn't going to burn everything down. I was going to rebuild it in my name. But to do that, I needed to play Evelyn's game better than she did. And to play it right, I needed someone on the inside. Blood isn't always family. I used to think blood was unbreakable. That family, no matter how ugly it got, would eventually circle back to love. But standing in my father's office that night, the one with the heavy oak desk and the scent of old cigars still lingering in the air, I realized that blood can be the easiest thing to betray. The lawyers had left. The guests had stopped calling. The house on Willow Street was finally quiet, the kind of quiet that made you hear everything you wished you didn't. In the faint light of the desk lamp, I found the papers that changed everything. Copies of my father's trust, his medical directives, and something else. An amendment filed 6 months before I came home. It bore his signature, or at least a version of it. I stared at it until my hands started shaking. It wasn't my father's handwriting. The loops of his H's, the way he slanted the Y, it was all wrong. Someone had forged his name, and I didn't need a DNA test to know who. When I confronted Linda, my stepmother, she didn't even flinch. Don't be dramatic, Henry, she said, sipping her wine like she was rehearsing for an interview. Your father was very clear about his wishes. He wanted the house to go to me. You've been gone too long to understand how things have been managed. Managed, I repeated. You mean stolen. She smiled, that calm, venomous smile people wear when they know you don't have proof. Oh, please, don't act like you ever cared about the finances. You left, remember? You chose your life somewhere else. I wanted to yell, to throw the papers at her face. But I didn't. I just stood there watching her twist the truth like she'd done for years. That's when I realized this wasn't about inheritance. It was about erasure. She wanted to erase me from my father's story completely. Later that night, I went through my father's study again, not for money or documents, but for truth. My father had always kept a leather-bound notebook hidden behind the books on the top shelf. It was where he wrote his private notes, thoughts, reflections, sometimes regrets. When I found it, the pages were half torn, but one entry caught my eye. If Henry ever reads this, know that I wanted you to have everything I built, not for the money, but for the meaning. You understood the work, the legacy. Don't let anyone take that away. That one sentence hit harder than anything Linda could ever say. I sat there for a long time staring at my father's words until tears blurred the ink. He knew. He knew what she was doing, and somehow he'd tried to warn me. I didn't sleep that night. I drove to my old friend Daniel's place in Newark. He'd been our family's accountant years ago before Linda replaced him with her cousin. When I showed him the amendment, he frowned. This isn't Charles's signature, he said immediately. I'd bet my license on it. That was all I needed to hear. Can you prove it? He hesitated. If I get access to his old filings, yes. but it'll take time. You'd have to play this carefully, Henry. If she smells that you're digging, she'll bury the evidence. I don't want to destroy her, I said quietly. I just want the truth. Daniel looked at me, half smiling. Then you'll need patience and a plan. Over the next few weeks, I pretended to move on. I spent time around the house, visited my father's grave, even helped Linda's lawyers with paperwork. Every time she looked at me, she thought she was winning, and that was exactly what I needed her to believe. In the background, Daniel worked quietly. He pulled old checks, scanned handwriting, and contacted a forensic document analyst. Meanwhile, I started piecing together a timeline: the hospital visits, the withdrawals, the amendments. It all pointed to one thing: she'd manipulated my father while he was under sedation. But here's the cruelest part. It wasn't illegal enough to jail her. Just immoral enough to destroy her reputation. The moment that changed everything came one rainy afternoon in early November. Linda was meeting with a potential buyer for one of my father's properties, the one he built with his bare hands when he started his company. She was planning to sell it for half its value to her nephew's firm. I walked in mid-meeting, calm and quiet. Henry, she said coldly, this is a private discussion. Not anymore, I replied. You might want to look at this first. I handed her a copy of the forensic report. Her eyes flickered for a second, just long enough to betray fear. You forged his name, Linda. You didn't just lie to me, you lied to the state. The room froze. The buyer looked uncomfortable. Linda set the papers down slowly, her mask slipping. You think anyone will believe you? She whispered. I don't need them to, I said. I just need you to know I do. Then I turned and walked out. For the first time since coming home, I felt like I'd finally taken something back, not the money, not the company, but my father's truth. But revenge, even when justified, doesn't end in a single confrontation. It lingers, coils, waits. 2 days later, I received a call from my father's old lawyer, Mr. Grant, who said, Henry, I've been reviewing Charles's last legitimate will. There's a clause you should see. It names a successor trustee, you. What I breathed. Yes? But only if you can prove Linda acted in bad faith. If you've got evidence, you're not just an heir anymore. You're the legal executor. I didn't speak for a long time. For months, I'd been playing defense, but suddenly, the board flipped. That night, as I sat alone in my father's chair, I thought about everything. The insults, the manipulation, the loneliness of being the unwanted son. And I realized something my father probably always knew. Family doesn't define you. Actions do. Linda taught me greed. My father taught me integrity. And now I would teach her consequence. It wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be violent. It would be measured, the kind of justice only patience and truth can deliver. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. It's time, I said. That was the beginning of the end. Or maybe the beginning of what I'd been meant to do all along. As I looked around the office, the empire my father built with his hands and heart, I whispered quietly, You were right, Dad. Blood isn't always family. But I'll make sure yours doesn't go to waste. And for the first time, I felt peace. Not because I had won yet, but because I knew I would. Lessons in loyalty. When people talk about revenge, they picture fire, fast, destructive, all-consuming. But in real life, revenge isn't fire, it's ice. It takes time. It requires patience, silence, and the ability to smile in rooms full of enemies who think they've already won. That was me in the weeks after I found out I was my father's true successor. I didn't announce it. I didn't storm in with lawyers or expose Linda on social media like some people told me to. Instead, I did what my father had always done. I listened, observed, and waited for people to reveal themselves. And they did. 1. The shift. Linda started to panic quietly. After I confronted her with the forged amendment, she became cautious, almost too polite. She'd offer me coffee in the morning, ask if I needed help sorting through the estate documents, and pretend to care about my well-being. But I saw the small tells, her fingers tapping too quickly, her eyes darting toward the drawer where she kept her phone, the way she'd stopped talking when I walked in. Guilt makes people transparent, and fear makes them sloppy. Daniel had already started coordinating with Mr. Grant, my father's old lawyer. Together, they began gathering evidence, bank transfers, communications with her nephew, and a pattern of financial reallocations from my father's company during his illness. Every transaction told a story, and every story pointed back to Linda. 2. The ghost of my father. One evening, I returned to the house to find an envelope slid under my door. No name, no return address. Just my name scrawled in shaky handwriting. Inside was a photocopy of a hospital record, Charles Ellis, patient under morphine sedation. Decision-making capacity compromised. Date exactly 1 day before the forged amendment. I froze. Someone inside the hospital wanted me to see this. Someone who knew. The next morning, I drove to St. Mary's Hospital, where my father had spent his last weeks. The nurse on duty, an older woman with gentle eyes, recognized me immediately. "You must be Henry," she said quietly. "Your father spoke about you a lot. Said you'd make things right." I swallowed hard. "Did he? Did you see him sign anything around that time?" Her face stiffened. "I shouldn't say this, but yes. A woman came in with documents, said she was his wife. Your father was barely conscious. He tried to ask for you." My heart clenched. What happened? She looked down. "He never finished the signature." She guided his hand. I drove home in silence, the nurse's words echoing in my head. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was betrayal at the most human level. And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for my father's dignity. 3. The trap. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not for a legal war, but a psychological one. Linda's entire power came from control of perception of information, of reputation. So I decided to take that from her. First, I called a meeting with my father's old employees. We met in the company's conference room, the same one where my father used to hold Monday briefings. I told them the truth, the forged documents, the fake amendment, the manipulation. I didn't ask for their help. I just asked them to remember what kind of man my father was. The next morning, whispers started circulating through the office. By noon, Linda's nephew, her business partner, called her panicked. And that's when she made her first mistake. She called me. "What did you tell them, Henry?" she snapped. "Only the truth," I said calmly. "But don't worry, I haven't shown anyone the financial records yet." Her voice trembled just slightly. "You're bluffing." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe not. But if you want to find out, go ahead and file that property sale you've been hiding. See how fast the state comes knocking." Click, silence. For the first time, Linda didn't have words. 4. Lessons in loyalty. I used to think loyalty was about blood, about standing by family no matter what. But I learned loyalty isn't about who you stand by, it's about what you stand for. When my father built his company, he kept every promise. He treated employees like family. Linda treated them like servants. So when word spread that she'd forged his signature, people stopped taking her calls. Investors pulled back. Her nephew disappeared from the office, and I didn't have to do anything. All I did was tell the truth. It spread faster than any rumor she'd ever planted about me. 5. The confrontation. It was late December when she finally broke. I came home to find her sitting in the living room, the fireplace unlit, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside her. Her once perfect posture slumped, makeup smudged. "Are you happy now?" she asked, her voice hollow. "You've turned everyone against me." "I didn't," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You think you're some hero, don't you, avenging your father? But you're just like him, stubborn, self-righteous, always believing you're better than everyone else." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. "No," I said softly. "I'm just not willing to destroy the people I love for money." She glared at me. "And what will you do now, sue me, throw me out?" I took a breath. "No. I'll let the system do that for me." I placed the sealed envelope containing the forensic report, hospital record, and signed statements on the coffee table. "The board meets tomorrow. They'll see everything. You should pack." Her face went pale. "Henry, please, this house was my life." "This house was his," I said. "And he wanted it to stand for something more than greed." 6. The aftermath. The next morning, Linda didn't show up to the board meeting. Her lawyer did. But he didn't have much to say. By unanimous vote, she was removed as trustee and stripped of any managerial control. When the decision was finalized, Mr. Grant turned to me. "Congratulations, Mr. Ellis. You've officially inherited your father's legacy." I nodded, but there was no rush of triumph, no cinematic satisfaction. Just quiet relief and an ache I couldn't name. Afterward, I went back to the house one last time. Linda had already left. In her absence, the silence felt lighter, almost peaceful. In my father's office, sunlight hit the photo on his desk, the one of us fishing in Point Pleasant when I was 12. I smiled. For years, I thought I came back to New Jersey to fight for an inheritance. But now I knew I came back to protect a legacy. 7. The real lesson. A week later, I visited Daniel to sign the final transfer papers. He looked at me and said, "So what now?" "Henry, you've got the company, the estate, everything. You won." I laughed softly. "I didn't win, I just stopped losing." He nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud." I looked out the window at the New Jersey skyline. The same view my father used to say looked like opportunity. Maybe I said. But I think he'd tell me something else too. "What's that?" "That loyalty isn't about holding on to people who hurt you. It's about honoring the ones who believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself." That night, I returned to Willow Street for the last time. The house was empty, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. I stood in the doorway, whispered a quiet goodbye, and locked it behind me. For the first time in years, I felt free, not from the past, but from the need to fix it. Some ghosts don't need to be fought. They just need to be understood. The inheritance of silence. Silence. That's what I remember most after everything ended. Not the victory. Not the moment I signed the papers declaring me the official trustee of my father's estate. Just the silence that followed, deep, heavy absolute. For months, my life had been a storm, accusations forged, signatures, courtroom whispers. Now it was over. The storm was gone, and what remained was the echo of what it had cost. 1. The empty house. I moved back into the house on Willow Street, though every corner still smelled like the past. My father's scent, that faint mix of aftershave and cigar smoke, lingered in his study. Linda's perfume had faded, but every once in a while I could still catch a trace of it in the hallway. It wasn't haunting anymore. Just memory. I spent mornings cleaning the place myself. No maids, no staff, no lawyers. I fixed the old clock in the living room, repainted the walls, and opened the windows wide. The air felt lighter, freer. For the first time since my father's death, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's story. It was mine now, scars and all. But ownership isn't peace. Some nights I still woke up expecting to hear my father calling from his room. Other nights I heard my stepmother's voice, cold, sharp, echoing in my mind. This house isn't yours. She was wrong. But part of me still believed her. 2. A visit from the past. It was early spring when Daniel came by. He brought 2 coffees and that same reassuring smile he'd had since college. We sat on the porch, watching the cars drift past on Willow Street, the same road I used to ride my bike on as a kid. So he said, sipping his coffee, "How's it feel being the boss?" I chuckled softly. "You make it sound glamorous." "It should be. You fought for it." "Yeah," I said, staring at the street. "But fighting changes you. You start to forget what peace looks like." He nodded quietly. "You miss him, don't you?" "Every day." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that says more than words can. Then Daniel pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket. "Found this while cleaning out the old office. It's addressed to you." It was my father's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note written in his usual clipped style. "Henry, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let grief make you small. Let it make you better. You have my name, but more importantly, you have my values. Guard them. Love, Dad." I must have read it 10 times before I realized I was crying. Not the bitter kind of tears, not rage or loss, just relief. 3. The weight of winning. Owning the company felt different than I imagined. People respected me, but they also looked at me like a symbol, the prodigal son who came back, fought corruption, and restored honor to the Ellis name. I smiled, I led meetings, I made decisions. But inside, I was still that son standing in the living room being told I didn't belong. Winning doesn't erase scars. It just teaches you how to live with them. Some of the old employees came back. Some didn't. I rehired those who'd been fired unjustly. I raised wages. And I quietly donated part of the company's profits to the St. Mary's Hospital ward where my father spent his last days. I even wrote a letter unsigned thanking the nurse who had told me the truth. Because without her, none of this would have been possible. 4. The step you don't see. I didn't hear from Linda again for months. Rumors said she sold her condo and moved to Florida to start over. Another rumor said she filed for bankruptcy after her nephew's company collapsed. I didn't check. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, but hate is just another kind of chain. And I'd finally broken mine. Still, one evening I found myself driving past her old neighborhood. Her lights were off. No sign of life. Just an empty driveway and the faint echo of what used to be. I sat there for a while watching the house, and for reasons I can't explain, I whispered, "I forgive you." Not because she deserved it, but because I did. 5. The final lesson. A few weeks later, I stood in front of the company's employees for the first annual address under my leadership. The air in the room was thick with expectation, hundreds of faces waiting to hear what kind of man I'd become. I looked around, and for a moment I saw my father standing in the back, tall, calm, proud. I smiled. I'm not here to rebuild the past I began. I'm here to honor it by doing things differently. I paused. My father believed loyalty was about standing by people. I've learned it's about standing by what's right, even when it hurts. The room was silent. Then slowly people began to clap. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a survivor anymore. I felt like a successor. 6. The inheritance of silence. Months passed. The company thrived. The house on Willow Street became a symbol again, not of greed, but of redemption. Sometimes at night I'd sit by the window with a glass of whiskey listening to the wind. And I realized that silence, the same silence that once terrified me, had become my inheritance. It was peace. It was closure. It was the sound of everything I fought for finally resting. One night, I opened my father's old notebook again. The last page was blank. I picked up a pen and wrote, "You taught me that legacy isn't about money, it's about meaning, and I finally understand." Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and sat in the dark, not lonely, not broken, just complete. They say revenge gives you satisfaction. They're wrong. It gives you silence. And sometimes, that's enough. I'm Booze N, and these are real stories told by those who lived them. Subscribe if you're ready for the next truth. If this story made you think twice, hit that subscribe button. The next one might just break you. Thanks for staying till the end. Every week I uncover another story the world tried to forget.